What is up, DW Nation? Huge week this past week on AEW. We saw the debut of Kenta, we saw the TNT Championship get defended, and we saw that a big faction in AEW is now one member less than what they were to begin with. So, without further ado, I'm Kevin Jones of Disciples of Wrestling, and let's hop right into it. So we start off this week's Dynamite with the TNT Championship match as Darby Allin defends against Joey Janela. Now starting off, this shockingly is turned into a technical match where on the behalf of Darby Allin as he starts to go for a very ground attack against Joey Janela, but Joey quickly switches this to a hard-hitting affair, and that's their respective styles as Joey starts to really quicken the pace against Darby Allin and really take control at the beginning of the match. He hits high-octane offense such as a tope suicida dive into a forearm strike on Darby Allin. We see Darby Allin go for a springboard coffin drop, which gets converted into a German suplex by Janela. We end up seeing at the end of the match an avalanche drop from Darby Allin onto Joey Janela from the top rope. And we see a lot of high-octane offense like that, but we also saw Joey Janela get caught by Darby Allin as Darby goes after Joey Janela's left arm. Now, I do like Joey Janela. I'm a big Joey Janela fan. I like his more traditional hardcore style, reminding me a lot of Mick Foley. But ultimately, we saw Darby Allin use the hammerlock drop on Joey Janela's left arm, turning it then into the coffin drop as he gets the win and successfully defends his TNT Championship. So next up, backstage, we see Sammy Guevara and MJF, where Sammy's actually bringing a camera guy, and MJF's in the room with the Inner Circle. He lets the guys know that he wants the room as he wants to talk to MJF, but keeps the cameraman inside. He lets MJF know that he's been noticing that MJF has been trying to take over the Inner Circle week by week. Now, MJF, of course, laughs it off and then tricks Sammy into saying that he hates Chris Jericho to find out that MJF was actually recording the conversation. Now, once Sammy finds this out, he throws MJF's phone to break it and then punches MJF on the gut, laying him down on the floor as he leaves the room. Now next up, we get the tag team match of Lee Johnson and Cody Rhodes versus Pretty Peter Avalon and Cesar Bonilla. I believe, I'm sorry if I got that completely wrong. But this turns into a very, very high obtain offense match, really displaying their prospects of Lee Johnson, Peter Avalon, and Mr. Cesar. Now, of course, starting off, we see Cody Rhodes just dominating Peter Avalon, getting him back from a few weeks ago when Peter Avalon low blowed Cody Rhodes. But we can see Lee Johnson end up coming in. He gets some offense in, but Cesar comes in and he just dominates both guys. He dominates Lee and he dominates Cody, really displaying himself as the big man. And he's a really, really nice prospect. I really like this guy. But ultimately, we see after he dominates Cody Rhodes, we see Cody hot tag in Lee Johnson, and Lee Johnson goes crazy as he hits this great and beautiful corkscrew dive on Cesar, comes in the ring, and at the end, we see Cody holding Cesar back, and we see Lee Johnson get a roll-up pin and gets the win. And that's actually Lee Johnson's first win since he's been in AEW. This man was on a 29 match losing streak, and this is his first win. So it was huge, and you could see the emotions on Lee Johnson. He gets interviewed by Tony Schiavone after the match, and then we see the Nightmare family come out to help celebrate for this guy. After this, we end up seeing the Young Bucks get interviewed, and they're frustrated, honestly, especially since they were hinted towards the fact that they got eliminated early. And then, of course, as they're about to voice their frustration, the Good Brothers come up. And they direct the interview over to them, talking about how if it wasn't for the Good Brothers interfering, we would never be having this conversation, as the Young Bucks were looking to win and then have the Good Brothers challenge them for the tag belts at Revolution. But of course, the Good Brothers end up swapping this over to blaming this on the Inner Circle, talking about how Santana and Ortiz eliminated Matt Jackson early on, completely dismantling the fact that the Good Brothers ended up interfering and getting Nick Jackson eliminated. But we end up seeing at the end, the Good Brothers want to go up for a 2 sweet, but we see Matt Jackson end up hesitating but of course Nick Jackson goes for it, leaving Matt Jackson frustrated. Next up, we see Hangman Adam Page get interviewed, and then of course they were talking about Matt Hardy, Big Money Matt, and talks about a possible tag team with Hangman, and Hangman of course denies it, talking about how he wants to focus on his singles career. And of course, look who comes in to interrupt, Big Money Matt. And Big Money Matt says, it's okay that we're not a tag team, but let's celebrate from last week. I'm still on that high. Let's go out to a bar and I'll pay for the drinks. And of course, Hangman's all for this. And since he's about to go to the back and get ready, he actually runs into the Dark Order. And of course, it's very, very awkward. And then Hangman ends up talking about how he's going to drinks with Matt. And we see some frustration from some members, especially Anna Jay. But overall, it was a very, very awkward situation. Next up, we get Pac versus Mr. Ryan Nevitt. And of course, we hear on commentary that the commentary team's actually in the favor of Pac, calling Pac arguably the best pound-for-pound wrestler on AEW. And if it wasn't for Pac's quarantining, he would actually be the AEW World Champion right now. And I'm not disagreeing, because Pac is unbelievable, and he showed this throughout the match as he literally picked apart Mr. Ryan Nemeth. And it's even when Ryan looked to get in the little bit of offense he did, Pac just rolled out of the ring and then swifted it back into his favor. And then ultimately we see Pac hit the Black Arrow on Mr. Nemeth into the Brutalizer for a submission win for Pac. Next up, we see the Inner Circle's MJF and Chris Jericho versus the Acclaim. Now, before the match, we end up seeing MJF approach Chris Jericho, all taped up, talking about what Sammy did to him earlier in the night. Now we end up seeing this match where the Acclaim do a good job of targeting MJF's injured midsection, but of course Chris Jericho gets in a lot of the offense, really swinging the favor into the Inner Circle. But we also saw some great tag team work from the Inner Circle onto the Acclaim. Now, of course, we saw Max Caster really get worked on for a good portion of this match, even though he got in some great offense. He ends up getting thrown out of the ring, and that's where we see the rest of the members of the IC get involved. Now, of course, we end up seeing the Inner Circle's momentum get changed as Max Caster is in this great submission from Maxwell Jacob Freeman. And of course, he's using the support of Chris Jericho from the outside because of Aubrey Edwards' positioning. But once Aubrey sees this, she ends up kicking apart their arms, switching the momentum to Max Caster. And then he gets the hot tagging in Anthony Bowens. And then Bowens runs wild. But as the Acclaim were actually pretty close to winning this match, we see what this came down to was Anthony Bowen going for a nice dive on the outside, but crashing and burning as there was nowhere to be found. And then we see Jake Hager pushing Mr. Max Caster off of the top rope into a Judas effect for Chris Jericho to pick up the win for MJF and himself. Now, after the match, Sammy Guevara music hits, and he comes out and he approaches Chris Jericho, and he flat out reminds him of the promise he made to him on December 9th, saying if MJF ends up causing another rift in the Inner Circle, then Sammy Guevara's out. And he did just that. He quits the Inner Circle and says he's no longer a part and wants anything to do with the boys. Now, after the break, we see Alex Marvez approach Sammy Guevara and to really just get an explanation of what was going on. And pretty much what Sammy said is, I just need a break, and he's going to take some time away from AEW. Next up, we get Matt Hardy and Hangman at the bar. Now, of course, Hangman's been having quite a few drinks, and Matt Hardy's still talking about the match. Now, Matt actually waits for Hangman to start to really get heavily buzzed when he ends up bringing out the contract. Now, this contract was actually a pitch from Matt Hardy talking about how he should be Hangman's manager and how being managed by Matt Hardy would actually bring up his stock and how Matt could actually make Hangman into the best wrestler in the world. And Hangman's all for it. So, of course, he says, hey, let me get the pen, and he wants to sign it. But he then goes, I will be taking 30% of your shares. But, that's not a big problem. That's only a little bit, especially if you become a big star. So Hangman agrees, and then he signs it. Now, then we see Matt Hardy go over to the cameraman and goes, now, I brought you here because, of course, when Hangman sobers up, he's going to be upset. But it's officially on the record now, I am his manager. The following segment, we actually see Sting, the Icon, get interviewed by Tony Schiavone. As Tony actually ends up asking the first question, none other than Team Taz interrupts on the Titantron. Team Taz, of course, is Taz and Powerhouse Hobbs in what looks like to be a car, of course. And they talk about, we got a surprise for you, bro. And you go to the back of the car where you see in a body bag Darby Allin there beat up with, of course, Brian Cage, Slash, and Ricky Starks. Now, of course, the boys get on the back of this SUV and they drive off with Darby Allin attached to the back of the van, and they're just going with Darby just hanging out and chilling in the body bag. Now, next up is the first match of the AEW Women's Championship Eliminator Tournament. And it's, of course, legit Layla Hirsch versus Miss Thunder Rosa. Now, it starts off very, very aggressive from Miss Layla Hirsch as she goes straight for Thunder Rosa with some very, very hard-hitting and aggressive strikes. Now, this ends up changing the tide when Thunder Rosa hits a great shoulder check from the outside of the ring onto Layla Hirsch's midsection. Really, what Thunder Rosa ends up doing is slowing down the pace quite a bit, actually. And this ends up leading to Thunder Rosa really taking over for majority of this match. But legit Layla Hirsch does get some control back in as she does hit 2 great German suplexes and then 2 phenomenal bicycle knee strikes. But she misses on 2 different styles of moonsaults on Miss Thunder Rosa, which ends up leading to Miss Thunder Rosa hitting her finish for the win, and she now moves on to the second round of the AEW Women's Eliminators Tournament. And now for the main event, we see Mr. Kenta and Kenny Omega versus Jon Moxley and the Murder Hawk Monster, Mr. Lance Archer. Now, before we get to the action, of course, Jon Moxley brings out the IWGP US Heavyweight Championship, and he's rocking it, that pretty thing, to the ring. And of course, before the match even starts, we find out that 3 out of the 4 men that are in this match used to be in our current US Heavyweight Champions for New Japan Pro Wrestling, and Kenta's looking to add his name to the list. Now, starting off, we see Kenta go straight after Jon Moxley, hitting him with the briefcase, taking him out of the action. Now, he tries to do the exact same thing to Lance Archer, and he won't successful, let's just say that. All right. Now, we end up seeing them take out Lance Archer, and they both go after Jon Moxley, and it's looking like they're not in agreement to who's going to go after Mox. So they end up coming together and realizing that they need to work together in this match. So they do, and as they finally come to that conclusion, Lance Archer just takes out Omega, and then we see Jon Moxley and Lance Archer just clean house. Now we end up seeing these guys take it to the crowd area, where we end up seeing Kenta and Omega try to get a 2-on-1 advantage over Lance Archer. But it won't really work, you know what I'm saying? As Lance Archer goes for a choke slam on Kenny Omega from while Kenny was on top of the barricade onto Mr. Pretty Peter Avalon's heart-shaped bed and just takes him out. It was just unbelievable. And then, of course, we see at the top of the entire bleachers area, we see that Kenta and Moxley are actually fighting their way into the kitchen. And this is where we see Mr. Kenta hit a DDT onto the catering table on Moxley and then lock in the LeBell lock. Now, Archer breaks this up as he hits Kenta with a box of potatoes. Yeah, he did that. And then we see ultimately the fight end up breaking out as Omega and Moxley end up breaking their ways back into the ringside area. And they're just going in on each other. We see these guys really just stay even for the most part, really sticking to Moxley style of fighting, which is just brawling. And ultimately, we see Omega get Moxley propped up onto this table outside by the timekeepers area. And we see Mr. Lance Archer look to powerbomb Kenta through the commentary table on the stage area. But Kenta ends up dodging Lance Archer and hitting a wicked running dive of double foot stomps on the Jon Moxley from the stage onto the timekeeper's table. And then we see Lance Archer and Kenny Omega are now face to face in the ring, and Archer's just dominating like usual. This ends up bringing out the Good Brothers to try to assist Kenny Omega. And as they're doing this, we end up seeing Jon Moxley bringing the barbed wire baseball bat in to clean house. Now, as he's cleaning house, we see Kenta hit the go to sleep on Jon Moxley. And then, of course, this leads to the Good Brothers hitting the Magic Killer, and then Omega hitting an assisted one-winged angel for the win for the boys. Now, overall, this was a very, very entertaining show. I really enjoyed this from start to finish. I think AEW Dynamite just continuously tries to raise the bar every single week, and they did so this week as well. But that was my recap. If you guys like the show, or if you like this recap, definitely let us know in the comment section. And of course, like usual, if you guys enjoy the show, definitely hit that like button down there. And then if you guys want to keep up with what we got going on with our content, hit that subscribe button. And if you guys just want to share us to your friends and let them know what you guys enjoy, don't be afraid to hit that share little arrow thing at the bottom. But don't be, definitely check out Jordan's NXT recap if you guys haven't gotten a chance to as well. And I'll be back as Saturday. I'll be back with you guys for the SmackDown recap. And of course, Jordan will be coming to you guys with the predictions for NXT TakeOver Vengeance Day. But until next time, I'm Kevin Jones, Disciples of Wrestling, and that's wrestling.